Hello, everyone, and welcome back to day 2 of Virtually 2022, Nemence's free virtual web accessibility and digital inclusion conference. I'd like to say a huge thanks to Joel Strohmeyer for his talk earlier, and also our speakers yesterday. A bit later on at 3 p.m. UK time, we have Laurie Samuels of NBC Universal with her talk, Making the Accessibility Switch, How to Change Behaviour at Scale. Up now, though, we have the UK Ministry of Justice's accessibility team, Danielle Lyne, Senior Product Manager, Beverly Newing, Accessibility Lead, Nathan Leahy, Associate Delivery Manager, and Woo-Hyung Han, Accessibility Specialist, with their talk, Moving Beyond Compliance, Setting Up an Accessibility Team for Culture Change at the UK Ministry of Justice. They'll be talking about their mission to enhance staff capability and knowledge, embed accessibility into Ministry of Justice processes, and create a framework for a longer-term approach to accessibility. The team will talk about what they did, what they learned along the way, and where they want to go next. My Clear Text are providing live captions, which you can either access through Zoom or in the chat, we've provided a stream text link for you. Also, all sessions are recorded and will be available shortly after the conference. Please do get involved in the discussion using the chat box. Just please make sure your settings are switched to panelists and attendees, and that way everyone can see your messages. Also, if you have any questions, please do submit them using the Q&A function also. Yeah, hope you enjoy the talk, and over to Beverly to kick things off.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, it sounds up really well. And thank you for joining us today as well. It's especially here in London, it's quite a sunny, warm day today, and this is lunchtime, so you could have all gone on a walk and you've chosen to come and attend this, so thank you. Yeah, as Henry said, we're going to be talking about moving beyond compliance, setting up an accessibility team for culture change at the UK Ministry of Justice. Introductions, yeah, just to recap what Henry said really. So we have myself as accessibility lead, my pronouns are they, them. We have Danielle Lyon, who's joining us a little bit later on, midway through the talk, Senior Product Manager. We also have Woo-Hyung Han, who's our accessibility specialist, and Nathan Lee, who's a delivery manager, and Freckles Dalam, who's not actually joining the talk today, but is in Nathan's photo. Former team members, because we're talking about this work that we did over the past year. We're the current people in the team, but other people contributed to this work as well. So we have Laura Payton, who was our former delivery manager, and we have Steph Monaco, who was a service designer at one point last year, and they contributed to the work that we're going to be talking about today. So wanted to give a shout out to them as well. So what is the UK Ministry of Justice? It's actually quite a big organisation in terms of staff numbers. We have in the region of 80,000 plus. It's a really big organisation, and we cover 5 main different areas. The first of which is Criminal Injuries and Compensation Authority, or CICA. So that's if you are a victim of crime and you need to apply for compensation because of the injuries or damages that you've taken from that crime. We also operate in the prison and probation space, so looking after the prisons in the UK, but also the probation system that follows after prison. We also have a legal aid agency, so if you need to apply for support with a legal aid, or if you need to apply for legal aid or support with a legal case. Fourthly, we have the Office of the Public Guardian. So this one relates to power of attorney. For example, if you have a relative who has dementia and they've reached a point where they can no longer manage their own finances, that's the organisation who look after the processes around that. And fifthly, or finally, we have the Central Digital HQ Platforms and Architecture bucket, which is sort of common platforms that we use across these different business areas in a tech capacity, and HQ for all the other teams, which I guess help us operate as a function. Specifically within these user groups, we have, well, it's quite important for us to think about accessibility in these different user groups because they will have quite different needs. So when you're looking at the prison probation system, 1 in 3 people in prison have a learning disability or difficulty. So that's something that we need to factor in when we're creating services for people in prison. And when it comes to Office of the Public Guardian, 45% of adults over state pension age have a disability. So when you're thinking about a lot of the users are people who are reaching an age in their lives where maybe they're no longer able to look after their finances, for example, dementia, Parkinson's, illnesses like that. And that's the point at which they'll be thinking about that. And they're quite a big proportion of the users of that particular business area. Criminal Injuries and Compensation Authority. Really depressingly, disabled people are more likely to be victims of crime, which is, I think, to me, that's Most upsetting statistic from all these, I think. But yeah, and the purpose of CICA is to help people apply for compensation if they have been a victim of crime. And lastly, MOJ staff. So we know that around 13% of MOJ staff are declared disabled. And a lot of the digital things that we create are for staff members. So for example, helping prison officers manage flows of people through prison, or booking prisoner visits, or booking moves between prisons, for example. So lots of the things that we create are for MOJ staff. And that is quite a big proportion of users who've declared it as well. It's important to note that's just declaration rates and maybe not representative of how many people actually have access needs. So in a nutshell, digital accessibility is really important to us in the Ministry of Justice. There's a lot of different user groups that we need to serve, and we need to get these things right, because these services aren't things people look at for fun. They're things that they need to interact with. They're government services, which are just things that we have to interact with. So what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the team, our team structure at the moment. We're going to talk about tackling legislative compliance, then our consultancy service, which we run, and then lastly, our vision and goals, and followed up with what's next for us as a team. And we're going to alternate between who's talking through the different sections. So I'm going to be taking the next one. We're going to be followed by Nathan. I'm going to talk about compliance. Who's going to talk about consultancy service? Danielle's going to join us and talk about vision and goals. And Nathan's going to wrap us up with what's next. So a bit of variation in his speaking. And one of the reasons we're doing this talk is to share one way of setting up an accessibility team. This worked for us in our context, and one of the intentions is to maybe inspire in you what might work for your organisation. Maybe these ideas are useful, maybe they're not, but it's the point of reflection, hopefully. So the history before the team. So this team at present was started in 2021 in April. And before that, there was a bit of work that went on to get to that point. So in 2019, I did some work on a profession project for 6 months. The remit of this project was to do various talks about the public sector body's accessibility regulations 2018 to the different parts of the organisation, to make people aware of that it was coming into effect and what it is that they needed to do. And alongside these talks, I would do training on how to do how teams could do their own basic testing. I did that for 6 months. After that, it sort of fizzled out a little bit. I didn't really have a clear vision of a team at that point in time, partly because I didn't know how other teams were structured. And so I went back to being a front-end developer. And I went on to being a front-end developer in a WordPress team with Danielle, who's also now on the accessibility team. And one goal that we had in that team was to create an accessible WordPress theme for the various arm's length bodies that operate under the Ministry of Justice. Because we have a lot of those kind of core functions I talked about, so CICA, HMPPS, but then also a lot of arm's length bodies who help to check that processes are being done fairly, and they serve as sort of complaints hubs, some of them. So that's very badly described. I should probably be able to describe it better, given that I worked in that team for a year. But that's sort of roughly what they do, is they serve as slightly separate at arm's length organisations who support the Ministry of Justice in what we do. So yeah, we created an accessible WordPress theme, which we could roll out onto these websites because they all have separate branding to gov.uk and don't use the design system. And then off the back of that work and some surveys that we ran, Danielle and I pulled together a proposal on what a team could look like and put in a request for some funding. And as you can tell from this talk, it was well successful because we had the team for the past year, which is very exciting. So yeah, first of all, on that note, we're going to talk about the team structure, and I'm going to pass over to Nathan. He's going to talk us through this bit.
Thank you very much, Bev. Yeah, I know it says Danielle there, but I think Danielle's joined us later on in the call. So I'll walk you through the team structure as it is now. And I think, a little bit later on, we talk about team growth and where we kind of want to grow and kind of expand as a team. But this is as it is right now and how the current situation works. So if you want to skip over to the next slide for me, Bev. You see a number of happy faces there on the right hand side. I am not one of them. I only just joined the team very, very recently, but this is the kind of the overarching picture as it stands at the moment. So we've got one senior product manager, that's Danielle, and we've got the one delivery manager that was previously Laura, you see there in the picture, and that's now myself, and we've got an accessibility lead, of course Bev, and then we have the mid-level accessibility specialist, and that's U. So they are very much the kind of the knowledge base on the team with all of the amazing knowledge about accessibility concerns. And you know, as a DM, once I've come into the team, learning the kind of depth and breadth of the specialist's knowledge has been really, really awe-inspiring for myself. So it's been really, really great to kind of get to grips with. And then on the next slide there, Bev, it just sets a little bit out about each role. And I think this is, you know, generic to most teams, but I know the terminology does change kind of from private to public sector as well. So in this instance, the senior product manager, they set the vision, you know, the product strategy, and they manage those stakeholder relationships kind of writ large. And as we go on through the presentation, you'll see that we as a team kind of identified a number of goals in where we want to be. And the senior product manager, Danielle, there was really kind of fundamental in scoping out what that looks like in terms of a body of work. The delivery manager is myself. I'm kind of new to the profession as of September last year. And yeah, I take that kind of goals work. I kind of help manage a plan on how we're actually going to get there and then build it into kind of sprints. We work in 2-week sprints here. And as I'll discuss a little bit later on, given the kind of breadth and scope of the work that we actually are doing in the team, it's really, really crucial to identify that kind of resourcing and what we actually can take on in each kind of body and block of time, if you will, to make sure that we're all working okay and we're not taking on too much and burning out. And then on the next slide, I believe that we have more on the actual specialist. So we've got the accessibility lead there, Bev. She's the technical lead. She's inputting into the roadmap that I spoke about and of design there, and speaks about accessibility roles across the organization and beyond. Bev's been doing some amazing work that kind of reaches from the MOJ more broadly kind of across Whitehall and across government as well to really, really get kind of accessibility concerns on the map. And that's been really, really inspiring to see as well. And we've got our mid-level accessibility specialist, who is kind of fundamental and is across everything from what I can see. They run the training, they offer the consultancy to the teams, and they work with the strategic partners on accessibility tasks. And like I say, those accessibility specialists as it stands, I've got this really, really great knowledge from the experience in working in different parts of government in different roles. And it's how we kind of untap that knowledge and get it out there to the wider division so that we can all as an organization grow, develop and learn those accessibility skills. So that's a kind of current picture. And then later on, I'll talk you through where we want to be in the future. And I think that's on to the next section now, Bev.
That is, thank you. So next up, we're going to talk about tackling compliance with the Public Sector Bodies Accessibility Regulations 2018. So for those of you who aren't familiar with them, they're a new piece of legislation which came into effect in 2018. They had a series of staggered deadlines, which have all now come into place. But what it at core requires is that public sector bodies have compliance with work accessibility in terms of WCAG, Work Content Accessibility Guidelines, to level AA. That applies to external facing things and also internal facing things, provided they were published after, I think, September 2020. There are a few exemptions, such as heritage items, where the process of making accessible would be detrimental to the item you're trying to make accessible, and really old documents. But for the most part, it requires that everything is compliant with WCAG to level AA. So the first thing we wanted to do was identify what's actually in the digital estate. So how many websites does Ministry of Justice have? And as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of public facing ones, but the majority is internal facing, so for staff. And that's across all the different business areas. So CICA, OPG, HMPPS, LAA, and HQ. That's a lot of different areas to get to grips with, and a lot of different people. It's a lot of staff in those areas. So what we did was we created a spreadsheet and we asked teams to self-report what their websites were and what stage they were at, so we could have a bit of a picture of how many different services there were out there. And we got senior support in making this request. So the head of digital, Nabiha Ahmed, helped us send this out to ensure people filled it out for us. And then alongside the spreadsheet, we asked people to let us know a series of pieces of information about their services. So we could try and get a sense of which ones did we need to fix first. So to help us think this through, we ask questions like, what is the impact on users if they can't access your service? Is it risk to life? Is it risk of serious injury? Or is it more in the kind of league of stress? To try and figure out what is the impact on users. And we also asked things like, how many users access this service? So there are a variety of different questions, about 14 in total. We put these into a big spreadsheet that Steph Monaco helped us build, our service designer. And from that, we got a ranking of services that helped us figure out which ones do we try and get fixed first. So yeah, using this, we arranged WCAG audits against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. We're quite a small team, as we talked through just now. We only have 2 accessibility specialists, and we're in the process of setting up a team as well. So there's a lot of admin that goes into setting up a team, and trying to do audits in-house at the same time would have been too much. So we arranged a contract with a third-party supplier. And what we did was we supported teams in booking the audit slots, which we then kind of made available, and telling them what it is they needed to do, such as creating the brief of which journeys to be tested and getting access as well. Because as I mentioned, there's a lot of internal facing things. These are sometimes on systems and networks which aren't externally available. So yeah, doing a lot of the unpicking of that sort of stuff. Yeah, so that's what we did to help with getting the audits. The audits tend to come at the end as things are approaching going live or going into public beta. It's good to do the audits, but ideally you'd be getting in before then. So I'm going to pass over to Young, who's going to talk a bit more about the consultancy that we ran.
Hi, thank you. So hi, my name is Young, and in the next few slides, I'm going to talk a bit about the consultancy work that we are doing currently and have been doing. Next slide, please. So as Bev already mentioned, audits aren't everything. And a lot of us on the call here will already be aware that, audits typically happen towards the end of the product build. And in our kind of work, that's when a service is going into public beta. So, most of us here might also be aware that accessibility is best considered and factored in early on and continuously. So we try to work with teams before that stage, and ideally we want to talk to them in their conceptual and design phases, really. So we try to do that in various different ways. And one of the ways that we do is by holding consultancy sessions with the teams. Our consultancy sessions are open to all of the teams. As you heard, there are quite a lot of areas that we cover. And we aim to be inclusive. Anyone can come to us and talk to us about any questions they might have in regards to accessibility. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of consultancy services that we offer, so a few things are accessibility reviews of services. That also includes design reviews. We do help with accessibility statements and identifying training opportunities that sometimes we run ourselves. Other popular themes that come up during consultancy are how to test for accessibility within your own team, or questions around document accessibility. And sessions can be really quite granular. So for instance, we had a session just 2 weeks back that was dealing explicitly with the accessibility consideration of charts. So often one initial session will lead to other sessions, and I'll give you a few examples of that in the next slides. Next, yeah, thank you. So we had a situation once where we helped an internal team with the accessibility of a website that had been created by an external supplier. This piece of work resulted in several sessions. We progressed from one step to the other together with the other team. To start with, we first needed to establish the base accessibility levels of the external product and take it from there, really. So that then uncovered several other strands of work. We started our work by arranging an audit with everything that includes, working together with our external audit supplier, and following the audit results, we then help communicating the audit results to the external supplier and work with them to address and fix the issues. And after those issues were resolved, we rechecked the solutions, of course, and as the last step, we kind of helped the team with the draft accessibility statement. And as a result, we now at least know the status quo. We have an up-to-date accessibility statement to go for this product. And most importantly for us, though, the next time this team is considering external suppliers, we will be considered, we will be invited to the talks right from the start. So we'll know what's happening, and then we'll have an opportunity to influence decisions as well. Next, please. Second case study that I wanted to talk about deals with documents. So the Judicial College had a lot of learning documents that needed to be filed and often updated and transferred as well. And yeah, naturally, we explored the option to recreate the documents in HTML, because that would have been a way more accessible solution, one that we prefer. But basically, we were being really pragmatic here. It wasn't going to be feasible. And then we pragmatically identified a need to help with the accessibility aspect around different document types. So we identified an opportunity to help with the upskilling by offering customized training, specifically focusing on Word and PowerPoint. In order to get there, we didn't really want to reinvent the wheel from the start. So we collaborated with the Welsh government, who were kind enough to supply us with some documents that they had utilized previously, and basically took it from there, tweaked and iterated, and made it suitable for our sessions. We also received support from the assistive technology team that we have at the MOJ, and they were great because basically they helped us by running demonstrations of assistive technology and how certain types of screen readers, for instance, work when they are run on top of Word and PowerPoint documents. So that was really valuable. Sorry, so as a result, I had a training pilot session where I gathered some feedback, iterated based on that, and then presented again at the stand-up session in front of an audience of 70, and the feedback was that it had been helpful, so really important. And we also got follow-up questions after those sessions, so that was also really good. Next slide, please. Okay, and the third case study was interesting in a different way again, because we worked with the Create and Vary License team to discuss the challenges that they were facing by to bring a legacy system up to date and also in-house. So we did a design review with them to help them identify potential issues with the prototypes, but that also involved looking at several interesting challenges. For instance, they had a list of like 48 potential rules to go into the license, but like 27 of them would then have additional data required to be added. And then so from there, the team then went on and did design iterations, thinking about the presentation of long lists, weighing up usability, accessibility, but also the existing user base. Yeah, and then the audit was also sent, the service was then also sent to audit, and this service now recently launched and promptly received unprompted praise from the policy lead that now they can identify the exact cases straight away, and iterations will be a lot more easy to achieve in the future. So next slide, please. A little bit about the processes behind the consultancy. In terms of process, this is how it usually goes. So the teams can approach us by filling out a form where they describe briefly what kind of questions they might have in terms of accessibility. And then we receive the form in our inbox and funnel this into our next sprints, if possible. And using this process really helps us to track demand and also schedule sessions accordingly. Usually that would be prioritized according to urgency and our time as well. So we started off by using a spreadsheet with links to other notes and other documents, but that had several drawbacks. So yeah, the amount of documents that were then linked to the spreadsheet document created sort of like, yeah, an overview that sometimes wasn't quite helpful. So we iterated and switched to a Kanban style board to help us with the visibility of the work within our sprint cycles, but also to keep track of all of the tickets, and then understand the relationship between the tickets, translating into numbers that we need to measure. So it just follows the simple principle of backlog, doing, and done. So for now, we're content with the current iteration, but there might be other options to explore in the future. So I'll hand over to Danielle.
Great, thanks, U. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk a bit about, I guess, the product input around our vision and goals. Everything that we did around this was collaborative, and yeah, we all worked through this together, and my role in that was to help us kind of facilitate and end up in a place where we had a kind of prioritized set of work. Next slide, please. So the vision itself that we developed had to kind of be what it says on the tin, be very clear about the audience that we're trying to kind of improve user experiences for, and both kind of be aspirational, because we know that sort of enabling accessibility at this scale is a huge kind of undertaking, but also make it tangible in terms of, as I said, the specific kind of specific ask and what we're trying to work towards. So the vision, I'll read it out, but it's essentially to enable our justice system to be used by people with disabilities and access needs. So that's what we've been working towards as a team. Next slide, please. Cool. And how we were going to do this was really kind of moving us away from, or at least trying to move us away from what we kind of described as accessibility as a tick box exercise, and really getting, I guess, trying to build kind of teams to think about accessibility by default as they are developing their products and services. And I guess the other thing was, where can we kind of add the most value as a kind of 4-person team to kind of help deliver that as well. And I think what we wanted to do as well as part of this kind of piece of work is to also kind of shift accountability, not be the team that is necessarily accountable for the accessibility of every kind of product and services that sits across the organization, but actually as an enabler in terms of how we can support those product teams to take accountability for their products and services as well. I'm not sure what the deal is with questions. I think maybe they're at the end, so we'll probably come to those, I think. So yeah, as I said, what the kind of value proposition that we wanted to kind of really hone in on as a kind of a relatively small team was to think about how we can basically give teams specialist expertise. So that was really kind of missing kind of on the ground in a consistent way. So that's really kind of speaking to the consultancy work that U's just been describing, and doing that in a kind of contextual way as well, like really helping to solve specific kind of problems for people in that moment. And then I guess the other kind of side of that was, how do we actually help to kind of future-proof, so we're not in a situation where we're remediating and going kind of through these cycles of just fixing the thing, but also making sure that we're building the right conditions to enable teams to kind of learn for themselves and kind of self-serve, and build and kind of embed accessibility into their everyday. So that kind of be by using kind of tools, training, and at least kind of talking about what some of the teams, they didn't know what they don't know, and that's not their fault. So, you know, how could we really help teams to kind of unpick what their product development cycle kind of looks like, and where accessibility should kind of form part of that as a kind of minimum, really. So that's the kind of value proposition. That's how we've been describing kind of what we want to do and what we want to be as a team back to the organization to get kind of buy into that. And then we set a number of goals to actually think about, okay, well, how are we going to do this kind of realistically and kind of prioritize this work. So next slide, please. Cool. So we got 4 goals. The first one is to create conditions for teams to self-serve for accessibility related learning resources, tools and solutions by building a knowledge hub. And the goals are actually quite solution driven, but that was to kind of make sure that the way that we were describing the work was quite tangible in terms of what we were going to deliver, so that we could kind of measure our own progress against it, but also kind of be quite clear with the organisation kind of where specifically we wanted to add value. So things like, you know, what content is actually relevant for self-serve, you know, looking at the consultancy data, what requires kind of a level of hand-holding versus actually where could teams have, you know, found this information, and us kind of not be a barrier to them getting that information, essentially. Where do we host this content, and how do we kind of effectively signpost? Imagine an organisation of our size. There's kind of pop-up websites, pop-up platforms, you know, all the things. So yeah, what's the most effective way to kind of manage a kind of platform of that self-serve content? And then how do we ensure that the content is actually kept up to date and governed appropriately? Because we know in these kind of instances where it's all shiny and new, and you kind of put all your stuff on there and you're like, yeah, everyone's going to use it, and then sort of, you know, 6 months down the line it's kind of fizzled and no one's paying much attention to it. So, you know, governance of this is a really important part of the work that we're kind of thinking about. Next slide, please. Cool. So goal 2 really speaks to kind of embedding accessibility into common services and platforms. So that could be something that you may have heard of already, which is MOJ Forms as a platform. We also have a pattern library, so making sure that those as tools are actually accessible themselves, so that when they are kind of scaling as a kind of common platform across the organization or a service, that we're not scaling products in a really bad way. We're sort of getting to the source. So things that we've been thinking about as part of that are sort of, you know, what are the most pertinent common services in terms of scalability, like where are the biggest kind of risk areas, I guess, and how can we help kind of shape that, and I guess, like, where are there common issues that we can help solve holistically? So we've been trying to take a real, like, strategic approach to the work as well, and part of that again is because we're a 4-person team, so we're trying to look for where there are common issues that actually you can kind of solve once in many places, and sort of help the teams in that way. And then I guess the other thing, there are users of that, those kind of platforms or services that are internal users as well. So you're thinking about marketing, communications. So how can we make sure that when they're sort of putting content on the websites or using those kind of platforms, that we're enabling those product teams to support their users in the best possible way through kind of guidance and the like. Next slide, please. And then again, kind of coming back to that real, like, specialism, so really advocating and promoting accessibility best practice solutions within digital teams. You know, there's we could provide the kind of content and allow that self-serve, but there is always going to be that kind of contextual nuance that people need kind of support with. And also, as specialists, we want to make sure that we're kind of that we retain that specialism and giving ourselves kind of time and baking that into our work as well. So things like, you know, managing the demand and prioritization based on the organizational needs and user needs as well. Measuring and iterating that consultancy. So, you know, looking at the customer data, looking at even the Kanban board that U mentioned, to kind of look at patterns in terms of the consultancy, and therefore how can we kind of iterate, you know, as we look to kind of new needs or new asks kind of coming through that we haven't seen before. And yeah, as I said, kind of how can we ensure we're delivering the most appropriate advice based on our sort of knowledge of the specialist area. So thinking more about our networks and doing our own research if we're seeing things coming through that we're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Let's kind of put this to the the networks that we have and see what kind of comes through in that way. So again, sort of making sure that we're not just you know, delivering that kind of consultancy in a vacuum, but we're thinking about how we can I guess, like, provide this level of expertise in a kind of user-centered way as well. Next slide, please. Cool. So and then kind of this is more aligned to the stuff that we talked about in terms of future proofing. So gathering the needs across the professions to understand an ideal way to kind of a sustainable and scale approach to accessibility. So in government, we have what's called a service standard. So each kind of product has to move through certain cycles to become a kind of live product. And so we don't want to sort of go off and create our own kind of framework that is just another framework that people have to kind of adhere to. Is like, how can we actually embed into existing kind of product development cycles and make that process as kind of robust as possible. What tools can we provide? So automated tools potentially, and partnerships. There's a lot of kind of partnerships and networks in the organization. People can really sort of help us out should they want to, but obviously that's it's an area in which does need to have some thinking and not just kind of asking people to do things for us without incentives or a kind of mutual exchange value. So what does that kind of piece of work look like? And then also collaborating with other government departments to kind of, like think about how other people kind of build in their teams and how's that working out and what the learnings from those, so we can kind of keep iterating our kind of our work and what that framework looks like as well. The goal itself is to gather those needs, because obviously, as you can imagine, that would be again a kind of huge piece of work. So first, it allows us to kind of understand the needs of the organization, the professions, and what's kind of happening at the moment and where those blockers are, so that we can prioritize our kind of efforts as we work through that. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's it. That's our goals. So yeah, that's a lot of work that you can see that we're undertaking, and I think that whilst our kind of product strategy is set for the next sort of 18 months, I think that we will continue to iterate. There's a lot of kind of work that we're doing to kind of still continue to capture the needs of those product teams, because whilst we have end users that we're trying to improve user experiences for, we're kind of seeing our customers, if you like, as the product teams, because they're the people that need to kind of take on the work to ensure that, you know, we're delivering kind of those improved products and services. And that's me. I'll hand over to Nathan.
Cool, thank you very much. Yeah, no, and I think if you pop over to the next slide, Bev, what I kind of tried to capture here is what we just heard from the kind of previous two speakers there. So, of course, you heard from U about the kind of breadth and depth of support that we offer to the entire organization, and Danielle's, you know, very kind of brilliantly articulated the real stretch goals that we've set for the team. And I suppose from a delivery perspective, that does seem really, really ambitious. And so, I mean, what as a delivery manager we need to come in and kind of do is say, look, we've got a finite number of people on the team, and as you can see, we're all on the call here. It's to kind of just us four, and we've got where we want to be, we've got these goals in mind, and we've set ourselves a kind of backlog of prioritized work. And so the teams kind of come together, the specialists have used their knowledge, and, you know, Danielle's, we've all as a team actually come together and said, you know, how do we break this down into actionable chunks of work that we can take forward? And how can we do that whilst continuing to support the business in the way that we do through the consultancy work and the audit work and everything else that we do? And I think, you know, we're all very, very kind of on board with the fact that this isn't a change that's going to happen overnight. We're going to make mistakes. We're a very kind of small team. We're a new team, and we're trying something really, really ambitious, and trying to kind of change culture more broadly across the MOJ. So it's that iteration piece that we mentioned earlier. It's trying things out. It's failing fast. It's you know, being allowed to fail, and then continually improving our approach accordingly. And we've been quite upfront with that. So I think for me coming in, and like I say, I've only recently joined the team, it's having that awareness of how much we actually do take on right now in terms of the support to the business, and understanding how we can actually implement this really, really ambitious package of work through the goals. And that does take me on to the next slide, actually, because if we click through, Bev, one of the challenges in that is the data piece. And I think, you know, when you are a team that supports the business in the way that we do, and, you know, we're always being contacted, we're getting emails, we're getting forms filled in, and we're offering that support, and it's within our kind of nature as people that are interested and passionate about accessibility to offer that support. But it's quite difficult to know how much work we can take on in terms of that goals and stretch work without knowing how much we're actually committing right now in terms of resource. And that is a real struggle. So we're looking to gather that data, and there are a number of different ways we're trying to do that through the different boards that have been mentioned here, through our Trellos, through our Kanbans. And we're trying to, I don't know, find out metrics and gather the breadth and depth of that consultancy. How many areas of the business do we actually support, and what's the work that we've actually done? The second piece of that, of course, is, you know, that allows us to show the real value of the team. You know, right now we haven't got those metrics to be able to stand up and say, look, as a team of 4 people, we actually do this great and amazing thing across the business. We support them in this way, and here's the change that we've done. And so having that metrics and those data, that metrics and those data, probably the way around, allows us to actually stand up in front of senior leadership and the kind of rest of the MOJ and go, look, accessibility is something you should be really focused on. Okay, here's what we've done and here's where we're going. And showing the value of our team, in essence, does demonstrate the value of accessibility concerns as well. And again, you know, from a delivery management perspective, I'm new to the profession, but I know that looking at that ambitious body of work with the number of people that we've got is no easy undertaking. So, you know, that data piece will allow us to kind of prioritize our time accordingly, prioritize our specialist time accordingly, and make sure that we're not taking on too much, you know, because at the end of the day, we're all people. We all want to continue our kind of job in supporting the business, and we don't want to burn out. So having that data is really going to unlock us to kind of be able to take on that additional work and go towards that culture building piece that we want to do. And on the next slide over, Bev, you'll kind of see where we are in terms of that expansion piece. And on this slide, I was quite keen to put across that we want to grow in terms of a team, and that's kind of headcount. That's one thing, but what we're also trying to grow is a kind of network and a kind of community of practice across the MOJ, and that will enable us to better support the business, definitely. So we're growing both kind of physically and also in our sphere of influence, and trying to get the word out there about accessibility, if that makes sense. So we are really actively looking to build out this network of specialists and grow that accessibility knowledge across the department. And we've heard about some of it there in the goals work, this idea of a self-serve content hub where teams can go along early on in the life cycle and find out what they need to know about accessibility and how to build it into their design. You know, if as a team we have a finger on the pulse in terms of common issues that we see across products that we build in terms of accessibility, and we can provide content that teams can self-serve up front, and we can run workshops and we can have sessions, you know, we're identifying that earlier on in the life cycle so that they can build it into the design. And it's not at the point of audit, just before you're ready to go live, actually you need to go back and do all of this to be compliant. You know, when we're kind of moving away from that approach, we want to get it right earlier on in the design, and that's kind of what we're trying to expand and do as a team. And so again, that third point pulls it together. The kind of networks that we build, those kind of meeting spaces, those communities of practice, whatever you might call it, allows us to be creative. It allows us to experiment, and it allows us to try new things. And I think what I've seen since joining the team as well is that it's not just the MOJ. You have really passionate accessibility specialists across government, across Whitehall. And it's how do we as a team, a small team, tap into that broad network of knowledge and expertise, and other teams that have probably gone along this journey before. You know, we aren't going to be the first people that are tackling on this sort of thing and trying to drive culture change. So how can we learn from DWP? How can we learn from HMRC, whoever it might be, and take those lessons into our teams to better support the business, better support the MOJ? And yeah, I feel like we're going to have fun getting there. Like I say, I'm new to the team. I saw this big package of work, all of these goals, and I thought, my God, how are we going to implement this? And I think we've got a really great network around us to achieve that. So I'll pass back on to Bev, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan. Yeah, for context, Nathan joined the team about 2 weeks ago, and he's clearly hit the ground sprinting. So very glad to have you in the team, Nathan. So yeah, that wraps up our talk. That was interesting and useful, and we're very welcome for any questions. Yeah, ask us any questions and we'll do our best to answer. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. That was an amazing talk. And yeah, it's amazing the work you're doing, kind of, especially considering you're serving an organization of 80,000, did you say? Which is, yeah, kind of mind blowing. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please do submit them now. I can see a couple in the chat already. I mean, it's really interesting you mentioned kind of training and education of others and how kind of integral kind of that all is for kind of culture change. I mean, Joel mentioned this earlier, and it seems like kind of a large part of working in accessibility is kind of comms and internal PR. And like you mentioned, kind of collaborating with, you know, other government departments kind of, collating learnings and that? Is that kind of quite a straightforward thing to do? Like, does it come with challenges and, kind of, is everyone kind of happy to share learnings kind of between different departments?
Yeah, they're really happy. At the start of this year, we interviewed a lot of the different heads of accessibility in the different departments. David Caldwell, who's head of accessibility at Home Office, is actually my mentor, and we chat pretty much on a weekly basis. But yeah, we also have a cross-government heads of accessibility meetup every month where we share common problems and come together to workshop on some of those things as well. So yeah, it's a really friendly community, and yeah, it's really a great one to be part of. I really enjoy it, and it's one of the highlights of this role for me, I think, is getting to see how other people are tackling this problem in different ways, because each department is a little bit different as well. We all have different structures, different setups, and different more structures to fit into. So yeah, it's a really interesting part of the role.
Awesome, thank you. Awesome. So we have a question here from Victoria. Asks, how did you make the transition from compliance focus to accessibility by default?
That's a good question. So we tried to step back from compliance, because as we talked about, it's kind of at the end, and with the things we talked about, by getting in at the start, it's a much more efficient way of doing it. Also, when you're looking at audits at scale, there's a lot of audits that we would need to do on a regular rolling basis as well, which would be a huge amount of cost as well. And is that really the most efficient use of time to do an audit every 6 months? Whereas if you're working with common tools such as MOJ Forms, which is a form building tool, if you embed that into that at the start, you can help that team build something where it's actually not possible to introduce accessibility issues. And you've got one team monitoring the structure or the architecture of the form, and that's creating loads of other forms, but they can't alter the structure. So partnerships like that are much more strategic and much more impactful. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in on this point from the team.
I suppose I could speak a little bit to the. Oh, sorry, Danielle. Do you want to go first, or?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add, we did early stage. So the first kind of year for us has been like a bit of an alpha. I think that was kind of described a bit earlier on in the discussion. And so we did try, actually. What we did was sort of think to ourselves, okay, where's the biggest risk? Because we were thinking about the scale of the team, and because we were a kind of year funded team at that time, we were thinking, okay, where can we kind of solve like the kind of gnarliest like issues? So we built a kind of risk matrix that kind of talked to like where how it would kind of impact the end user based on the type of service that it is. So for instance, someone trying to apply for a legal aid agency, that person is already in quite sort of trying circumstances, for example. So we did build this risk matrix, but what we kind of realized along the way is that we were kind of taking accountability away from the teams and from the deputy directors. So we realized quite quickly that job was going to become a kind of big data job, and that wasn't going to allow us to kind of really get into teams and kind of, I guess, create value kind of longer term and help build that kind of culture and I guess the capability and understanding. So that's kind of why that's how we were able to kind of flip it on its head as well, because we actually learned that in that process it wasn't maybe the best approach that we could take kind of to achieve our vision. Sorry, Nathan, you crack on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I echo that. And I was just thinking about it from the delivery perspective as well. And as I would kind of sit on one of those product teams or one of the services that we support, and you kind of ask the question with a lot of things, don't you? It's like, how does it benefit me? Why should I think about accessibility, early on in the life cycle? And for me, it's that thing is, moving away from seeing it as a checkbox exercise, or from a product perspective, it's kind of seeing it as a blocker to live right at the end of the process. So if teams are bought in throughout and they're doing it early on in the life cycle, that potential blocker at the end in their mind is just completely removed. If they're using common platforms that are accessible, or they're considering accessibility throughout that kind of design stage, it makes the entire delivery process so much easier throughout, and you can kind of build services quicker and better and accessible from the start. So I feel like once you are able to communicate that, you start to get the buy-in from teams very, very early on. And I think that's a really key piece. I know, Henry, you mentioned there about the internal PR piece. I think that's so important. It's kind of getting across why it's important and what the benefit is of considering it early, considering it throughout. And that's one of the things that the team will definitely be focusing on.
Brilliant, thank you. We have another question here from Victoria, who asks, how do you enable the team to self-serve, and what format did you teach them about tools they could be using, and what style of meeting did you show them the unknowns within the team?
Very good question. So that's actually a piece of work that we'll be working on in this current year. We haven't yet identified, we need to do the work stream around identifying what content that they need from us, and then where is the most accessible place to host it as well. So that's what we're going to be working on first. But we have done bits and pieces along the way in last year where people have reached out to us requesting a piece of content for a specific use case, normally around accessible documents. And in that circumstance, we've worked with a content designer on what we call a profession project, where we support them in working on accessibility task, and then that becomes the output. Yeah, that's something that we're going to be thinking about a lot over the next year.
Awesome.
Anybody else want to come on that point?
Yeah, I was just going to say that just to highlight again your kind of point around the profession projects, because there are kind of people really engaged across the organisation, and I think to kind of the points that Nathan's made as well, like using and harnessing people that are engaged to actually act as our kind of distribution of that knowledge as well, and kind of building a little bit more engagement there, and I guess kind of you know, thinking about how we kind of incentivize, and not through money, but I guess through that kind of mutual exchange of value, like how do we actually get people kind of engaged in that and kind of working for us in a way that they probably don't know that that's what they're doing. But yeah, Bev's been our solid unpaid PR manager for the last kind of year or so, so she's doing an amazing job on that. But yeah, that's kind of the way that we've been tackling at a small scale, but we know we need to kind of really ramp that up.
Awesome. Yeah. And I hear, I mean, I think I've mentioned a few times kind of in talks both yesterday and today, kind of the power of kind of having a network of champions kind of throughout an organization, and how that can really help kind of get that accessibility message across. So kind of finally, I mean, you mentioned kind of failing fast, learning quickly, kind of trying new things, and kind of having the space to be kind of allowed to do that. Was it a challenge kind of getting buy-in for this?
That's a good question. I think it went pretty well. As we talked about at the start, Danielle and I did the proposal, and it just, you know, there weren't really any challenges to it. It was accepted pretty painlessly. I guess in part because of all the background work that we'd done to get to that point, such as the surveys, the work we'd done on the accessible theme. But in terms of getting actual funding, it did feel pretty painless. I don't know if you want to add to that, Daniel.
Yeah, I think just again to your point, Bev, all of the groundwork that went in, and the proposal was pretty solid. You know, we talked about what was kind of missing across the organisation in terms of that strategic approach to accessibility, and actually just being really transparent about the fact that you know, accessibility is a kind of legal requirement, sits on the head of digital's head, as it were. So saying that in a kind of constructive way definitely helped that conversation as well. And I think capturing all of the user needs and being able to see and articulate where we were going to kind of focus initially as a kind of smaller team based on the needs of the organisation worked quite well for us as well. And that came from the work that Bev did during that kind of discovery piece.
Thank you. So we've got one more question here from Nairi, who asks, do you see it as a possibility for learning products to be created and made mainstream on kind of, for example, civil service learning?
Yeah, good question. So that's something that we'll explore when we're looking at the different platforms for our content hub, or hubs plural. It depends on where we end up hosting the content. But we're aware of DWP have that really great resource, which is public facing. We might end up doing something similar. And some of the work that we do with with external suppliers, and that feeds into the products that they offer out to other departments, like what you talked about with the external supplier. Some of the changes that they made there were to their base product, some of it to the individual configuration that we had, but a fair few went into that base product, and we know that they're used across different departments too. So yeah, we're trying to, given that we've learned a lot from other departments as well, we're always keen to share back and feed back into the wider accessibility community, because government's a big organisation with a lot of leverage really in terms of the amount we spend on different services and suppliers. So yeah, we're trying to feed back into the wider community with the work that we do as well. Any other thoughts from the team?
Sorry, I talk a lot. I was just going to say, and to that as well, each of the heads of professions are kind of collaborating in terms of how they actually onboard new members of staff as well. So not just the kind of platform itself, but also how, in the design community, kind of thinking more widely about inclusive design. So how can we kind of ensure that the kind of content and tools that we kind of know about are integrated into the kind of work that they're doing around onboarding as well, not just the kind of the bigger kind of learning platforms.
Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, I think that's just about all we've got time for. Bev, Danielle, and Nathan, thank you so much. Yeah, it's amazing talk, and really lucky to hear your insight and the work you've been doing. We're back later on this afternoon with Laurie Samuels, Senior Director of Accessibility at NBC Universal. That's in just over an hour at 3 p.m. UK time. Again, thank you to everyone that tuned in. Thanks to the Ministry of Justice team, and yeah, we'll see you back a bit later. Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.